Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to GC's Book Club. I am GCMckay, your host for this evening, and, well, in case you haven't guessed it already, on tonight's show we'll be discussing I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. Well, let's just dive into it a little bit, shall we? This book was first published in '95, which is nearly 30 years ago, and it was originally published under the name of The Mistress of Silence, which is a quote from the book, as is I Who Have Never Known Men. And alright, so there's people just going on about football in the thing, so let me just carry on with this. Yeah, so both of the original, or both the titles, have been quotes from the book, but I was quite intrigued to find out that it was originally called The Mistress of Silence and has been repackaged not that long ago. I think 5 years ago maybe it was put out again under this current name. Can't seem to see any info on it right now, but I think it's roughly about that. I think it might have been 2019, so yeah, 5 years ago, yeah, give or take. I have theories as to why that is. I do think it's a better title. I would say The Mistress of Silence is actually more accurate in some ways, but kind of lends itself toward a potentially different type of novel. But I kind of feel like so does I Who Have Never Known Men. But yeah, I'll probably get into that at some point anyway. But regardless, yeah, this is it's a little gem of a book, I would say. It's one of those ones that's quite rare, hence being a gem, but also it's kind of one of these, it's essentially plotless. I mean, you do have a kind of, template of a plot there, but I felt like it was pretty obvious that we weren't really going to get answers, and I kind of felt like that was the point, and I was fine with that. In fact, I kind of found it to be some of the most interesting elements of it, and, well, I'll get into what the plot is for anyone, and in fact I'll actually use Wikipedia because the Wikipedia page for this is pretty minimal. So let me just, so yeah, the synopsis: 39 women and a girl are being held prisoner in a cage underground. The guards are all male and never speak to them. The girl is the only one of the prisoners who has no memory of the outside world. None of them know why they are being held prisoner, or why there is one child among 39 adults. One day, an alarm sounds and the guards flee. The prisoners are subsequently able to escape. They find themselves on an immense barren plain with no other people anywhere, and no clue as to what has happened to the world. The book explores themes of loneliness, sensory deprivation, and survival. But you'll also notice, as maybe some of you did in the poll I put up, that it does label it as a science fiction novel. I take qualms with this. Technically speaking, you could call it a sci-fi, just as you could call it a dystopia, or even a horror. But I can't really say anything else apart from it being, it's an existential piece of literature. Maybe you could also suggest that it's psychological, whatever. There are crossovers with all of those genres, but really it's about the human condition overall. And that's kind of what I adored about it. It wasn't really looking to, you know, delve down the typical kind of sci-fi avenues or anything like that. It was much more of a delicate, quite sparsely detailed, but it was oddly calming, and yet there was kind of nothing happening a lot of the time. And we were just, you're in the head of this nameless girl who is an outsider in the very traditional sense, whereas not only is she a different age to her fellow captives, but also she doesn't know the world before this time, so this is her world. She doesn't know anything else really. There's stories about what happened when everything occurred, but everyone else's memory in regard to this is quite blurry as well. And I think that was actually let me just get her name in my Harpman's intention, because what are our memories really? Like, it kind of bookends this in a number of ways from the beginning and then right at the end. And in some ways I found that the novel was even critiquing itself at times, especially towards the end. But anyway, yeah, it's it reminded me a lot of the Tartar Steppe. I think was if I was to give you a kind of male companion piece for this, it would certainly be that. But I would say it also stands on its own dune, let's say, mainly because the Tartar Steppe for me is kind of like the hero's journey, but in reality. Whereas this, I don't really see it as a heroine's journey. I see it more as a question of who we are when our circumstances and our relationship to the world and everything that we know has been essentially taken away, and there's only little tidbits of it left and remaining for her to, basically scraps of an old world that our protagonist can only really learn about through the mouth of others, and whom really has no clue what it means anyway, because if you've never encountered, say, air conditioning or an oven or electricity outside of a light bulb, how would you understand what it is? You know, I don't really think, and I think there's a good kind of question within the book as well as to where they are, because they don't actually know whether they are on Earth or on a different planet, and it's just one that they're possibly trying to to establish themselves as people. But there's loads of questions you could keep asking of this, and I kind of feel like that's the point a lot of the time, because it's almost they're just there because they woke up after some disastrous event and they happen to be prisoners, whereas the only men that are around happen to be guards. But really, as we come to know later on, both are prisoners in this world regardless of their position, and for some reason they are not allowed to intermingle. We don't really get an answer as to that, but I feel like that's fine. I don't really feel like it's the point. I think it's just you get this kind of perspective from a female vantage point, although I would still argue that, you know, our protagonist especially is more androgynous than anything else, especially as it goes on, because her genitalia and even, you know, reproductive system is kind of redundant, and it is so in the way her body treats itself. So in a lot of ways she is more childlike throughout her whole lifetime than anything else, I would argue. And I would pretty much lay claim to it. It's kind of irrelevant that she's a woman. Like, I mean, there is some relevance to it toward the end and the ironical way in which she perishes, but aside from that, I didn't really think, I didn't give it much credence. It's fine. I don't really, you know, but yeah. So we have our female protagonist, and they're in a situation where every day they get woken up at a certain point by these guards. They go about their day of cooking, doing kind of menial shit just for themselves, maybe trying to put some clothes together that they've managed to, you know, get some supplies for, but everything's very minimal, and they have no idea why they're there. They have no idea where they are and what the purpose of it all is. And again, it's already kind of alluding to the existential questions that are going to crop up more and more and more as the novel goes on. During this stage, there is a sequence which I found a little bit, I don't want to say it was dull, but it was more like, okay, I'm literally reading about a girl who's teaching herself how to count seconds through her heartbeat for about 3 or 4 pages, and it's quite detailed. But I would actually give credit to Harpman for this, because I do think that was quite cleverly alluding and foreshadowing toward the passing of time. And I think the thing that reminded me about the Tartar Steppe, or with this book, was actually how time would pass by like nothing. It's been I can't remember how many. I think she's been in there 9 years before they actually escape this bunker. And then after that, I think another 10, 12 years goes by. All the other women are dying off in droves, pretty much. And yeah, before you know it, she's gone from being, I think, a teenage girl, or I think she might have been in her early 20s when they first get out. And then she gets all the way to about 60 odd, something like that. At least by her calculation, because she has no real way of measuring time, apart from what she's assumed to be correct via the way she's taught herself how to count. Which again, like, that's why that section kind of becomes relevant, because it almost puts you into a state of somewhat listlessness, I would say, as you're reading it. Like, I found myself very captivated by it, and I couldn't really explain why, even though it was like, okay, they got out of the cage fortuitously, because this siren goes off just when one of the guards has just opened the gate. The guards all run off for reasons we never find out, why. And then the women are, left to their own devices, essentially. And once they come out of it, it kind of, in some weird way, it did remind me of like these kind of simulations in computer games. And early on in the novel, because I thought it was more recent than it actually is, I kept thinking, did this woman play like an awful lot of The Sims and like make a fucking like whole novel based on like its premise, where you just wake up and you're inside this bizarre world and it's almost like never ending, but there's nothing in it? Because once they get outside and the celebrations kind of die down and they feel their liberation, they very quickly realize that every which way that they go, they're in the same area. Basically, like, they can travel, east, west, south, north, doesn't really make a difference. The weather barely changes, although there are seasons, but there's no insects. There's only a few kind of plants. This actually made me kind of, I think they are most likely on a different planet overall, but I think that's because there are a lot of hints as to, there being on a land that they're probably trying to populate but haven't figured out how to, actually live in because of the conditions. But it could equally be about Earth after nuclear war, because there is theories that radiation is some of the reason why the women get sick. But again, I think to pontificate on such things is almost moving too far away from what the novel is trying to achieve and what it's really getting at. And the questions it's asking about, like, what is your identity and how frail is your identity, is considering that without the kind of things that we've all grown up with, which are equally as imprisoning as they are meaningless. But even without those, it's like, how much of you is you, essentially? What are the things that make up the person you are? How could someone in such a condition be able to relate to another human being if the world that they grew up in was bereft of everything that you and I grew up in? It asks some fascinating questions, and especially in terms of like how it then expands it out. So once they're out of the cage, they kind of search around for a while, and the only things they seem to ever find are bunkers that are complete replicants of the one that they escaped. And they realise that the only reason that they escaped was it was by chance that the guards happened to open the gate during a switchover as the siren went off, because all the other prisoners on this island, let's call it, they're dead. You know, they've all pretty much suffered from starvation. By the time, you know, our women find them, yes, it's way too late, and they were just, unfortunately for them, they were just left to rot. Some of them managed to die with some dignity, and there was a male group of prisoners as well, but aside from their gender, there's pretty much nothing else to differentiate them. And so the women do travel around for quite a while, but as a number of them are already getting on a bit, at some point they kind of give up on that and they create a village of sorts, or at least they start housing themselves so they can kind of live separately or as couples or small little kind of family units. That kind of keeps them content for a while because they can occupy their minds with building and, you know, learning how to craft certain tools or what have you. I mean, this is from the perspective of the child, I'll refer to her as the other characters do. And so the child keeps herself occupied, basically, as you would in a prison, because all they've really done is move from one cage to a much bigger one, and any chance or hope that they have of finding out why they're there and all of that kind of comes down to what every human being starts asking themselves from time to time. And really, you know, you're as clueless as the day you were born as you will be during the day you die. So once all the other women have died off, our girl can start traveling around again and vows to do it until she basically perishes. And at some point then she finds a bus, or an abandoned bus that is, you know, rusted away and all of that kind of stuff. She finds a few more items on there, and then she stumbles upon a secret type of underground bunker, which is actually like a quite luxurious house that you imagine would be housing some sort of powerful person, but it seems as if it was never occupied, so they never made it. And so she has this place to kind of see out the rest of her days, and this is where she comes across implements that give her the power to write. And I suppose if I was to really nitpick at some of the lengths it goes to, I do find it slightly dubious that she was able to learn how to read, for instance, or would be able to understand grammar as well as she does. Not because, you know, I'm doubting her intellect, but more if she didn't learn some of this stuff as a kid, then it's very difficult to think that she'll be able to grasp it as she gets older. But at the same time, what the fuck else has she got to do? So I kind of feel like, yeah, maybe through perseverance, maybe because of the oddity of the situation and the uniqueness of it, it does enable her to tap into that part of her brain that might not have perished as she aged, because she had no real reason to age. She doesn't really even hit puberty properly. So in a lot of ways, she is both bot-like and androgynous, because it's kind of like, yeah, she's got all the human functions, but she's never had to live as a human, if you know what I mean. And yeah, I mean, there's plenty of like things that you can look at from this piece and think, oh, well, it would be interesting if they actually answered why this, that, and the other. But I kind of feel like if you were to demand answers as to why the guards suddenly run off when the siren goes off and what the hell was it all there for, the only real answer you're going to get from that is to go down a much more traditional sci-fi type of route, which I think would have made it turn into something like The Maze Runner or some shit. and it wouldn't have worked. I mean, yeah, you might have had a plot to answer everything or whatever, but all that would have led to is another series of events where it's like, oh, it's this government agency who've put together this blah blah blah, and like they, you know, it would become like a conspiratorial thing where we get answers, but we'd have to therefore travel down a totally different type of novel to get that answer, and it would have been totally against what I think Harpman was trying to say with it. So using these plot devices were necessary just because that was the way to get further into the questions and the exploration that the novel wanted to get into. Similar again to the Tartar Steppe, where it's like there's a promise of some sort of meaning really at the end of it all. Like the guy who goes off to battle, Drogo I think his name is, or he thinks he's going to battle, but then he ends up spending the majority of his life standing at a post waiting for the enemy, which never arrives. And in this, the difference I suppose is that that promise alone is not really given to the child. It's imagined in a very similar way to how it is kind of imagined by Drogo, but there's nothing really to say that it's real. Like, it's all kind of just, well, I suppose hoped for. And yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things. Like, that's why I'm slightly perplexed by seeing that it's sci-fi or dystopia or even horror. I can see there's certainly elements of horror in it, but the true horror of it all is the existential nightmare of the human condition, I would say, and that is what it so masterfully engages with. And there are some like passages throughout it where just the questions that have this kind of innocence, and yet you still can't answer them. So it's a little bit like when a child will keep asking you why, but then it's got a bit more to it. So even at the beginning, she's talking about literature and like reading how authors give explanations as to what they wanted to do and all this kind of stuff, and she's finding it very perplexing. And then we get quite a nice answer to that when she kind of does the same thing. But then there's also these other bits. I really like this part about how she can no longer measure time without other people being around. It's almost like she needs to live in moments between people in order to have any concept of what time actually is, because without that kind of communication, without these little pockets of memories, I suppose, essentially, but even just moments in general, without that there's nothing to distinguish one day from the other. And little things like that, which I thought were just little delicious delicious little flourishing sentences, which just kind of like, it kind of gave you the feeling of being in this lost land, essentially, or this barren kind of landscape. You could really imagine what it would be like to be there. And I think what the loneliness it taps into with the protagonist is one that everyone feels just by being human. It's kind of like, and therefore you oddly feel kind of a collectiveness with that. You know, we are together in our aloneness kind of thing. And there's a beautiful poignancy to that. It is bleak, I'd give it that much, but I'd find it quite peaceful and serene almost in places. I think the horror comes to me when you realise that they've been basically doing nothing for like 12 years or 20 years or whatever, and it's just like, but then that's when the reason it's horrific is because when you think of your own life and how quickly the last 15 years, 20 years have gone, it's exactly the same. And yeah, that passing of time, much like the sand that's surrounding them, is it's cruel in the human mind, I suppose, because the way we think and break things down to try and understand them, and how fragile that understanding and meaning really is when when its own story comes to an end and therefore nothing carries it on. It's got all these little, just little tidbits there that just work very, very well. As an author, I think she studied, or she was a psychoanalyst as well in her career. I think her family went through things during World War II, when Nazi occupation and things like that. And I think she must have drawn from those experiences to create this very bizarre, incomprehensible world. But yeah, I mean, I suppose the cynical side of me thinks it was republished as I Who Have Never Known Men as the title, because it would feed very much into the current political climate that we're in. And I do still believe that, even though I do think it is a better title than the previous one, despite the previous one being more accurate. And yeah, I mean, I suppose when I went into it, I was expecting something. The reason I think that title is misleading is because it kind of insinuates that men will be a part of the story, which they kind of are still, but in a much more demeaning or threatening or violent type of way. Maybe that's just my own projection, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that that's what it's insinuating. And it was actually refreshing for it not to be about that at all. I didn't even think the female side of things was, again, I didn't really feel it was that relevant, really. I mean, it was refreshing in a degree to be like, oh, I haven't actually read, a story like this from a female perspective, but that's just trivia, really. I mean, I don't think it really makes much of a fucking difference overall. Maybe in terms of, how a man might look at it and all of that kind of thing, but yeah, I just found it interesting as a read just because it was fucking human, and it was tragic in its humanity. I found, and some people were saying like it's all about hope at the end of it and stuff, and I was like, I don't really see where the hope is. I mean, this place is like a Sisyphean nightmare to the nth degree kind of thing. It is quite literally like, oh, there's one bunker with a bunch of corpses in it with exactly the same environment. Oh, look, and then like 10 miles down the road there's another one that's exactly the same in this fucking barren landscape. It's I mean, there's actually quite a nice bit as well where it does talk about the possibility of like this place being a quantum loop of some sort, where they're just literally trapped inside a place where one thing just becomes the same over and over and over again for affinity, and and it's just like, or infinity. It is like, wow, this is yeah. And then when that becomes the reality, and ever since like reading it, it's kind of like it makes you think about all the things that we do over and over and over again, thinking somehow that isn't just as mental, really. Like when really it is. It's just like the same shit being rebuilt. It looks a bit different maybe, whereas it doesn't in this, but really it's the same when you get down to it all. I suppose the protagonist did remind me a little bit of the one in The Handmaid's Tale, but I found the one in this novel to be a lot more endearing and charming and interesting just in general. I didn't really take to the protagonist in Atwood's book, but I think the tone was familiar. Like it had that same sort of quiet, or a disquietude to it, where it was still curious but it was also cautious, and yeah, it had a level of intellect that was quite inquisitive just in general and pretty much at all times. She does have orgasms. She calls them eruptions, and she kind of keeps them a secret. And she kind of tells herself stories in order to bring them about, because she doesn't know what it is that's really making this happen. But then that's kind of dropped pretty quickly when she, once she knows that her own reproductive system is useless, it kind of puts an end to this exploration. I mean, there is a little bit here and there, but it's never focused on too much, and she doesn't even like physical touch, which is quite another fascinating difference of her compared to the other women. But also just putting that out there as well, of like, if you grow up without that for most of your life, maybe it does become an abhorrent thing, which is sad for her, because I think there is a yearning for her to have this, and yet it's such a fruitless and futile desire considering the circumstances, that it just becomes a kind of silent ache in her. And she is essentially the silent mistress, or the mistress of silence, as the original title laid to claim. If I was going to be a bit, she kind of is your modern femcel, which is not. I'm totally talking shit, but in the regard where she is essentially a virgin her whole life. But what does that even mean when you never even develop your productive organs and all this kind of stuff? It doesn't really. Even the concept of it all, like, it is explained to her at one point, and she does see the male form, in a mummified sense. But again, when you've got no real inkling as to what that could entail, it becomes. So basically, what Harpman does is take the human condition and strip everything away from what makes it up, and then tries to rebuild from the bottom. And it's a fascinating novel, and one that I'll be very intrigued to read again at some point, just because, obviously I'm getting that excitement of the first time, and I love it when I can't quite explain what it is about a piece that makes me want to keep going back to it, because it's like I was excited for her when she was finding a bus and all of these little things, even though a part of me kind of knew, like, this won't lead to anything, like we're not going to have like a person suddenly appear, or even an animal or something. It's not going to happen, but at the same time you're with her during it. And to close it, she kind of talks about how, and I love this as well, where she was basically talking about like how even writing down the story, and if it is read long after she's dead, that will keep it alive, but it will only really be so inside the mind of somebody else. Therefore, it has become both separate from her again and anew, because it lives in the mind of somebody else's interpretation. And it's just these beautiful kind of like ways of looking at literature and of the passing of knowledge and storytelling in general. Like, it's life, essentially, what it's kind of getting down to. And as bleak and hopeless as it all is, there is that degree of grace to it where things are passed on. They're just not quite in the way that we would like them to be, in a kind of solidified sense. It's like nothing ever stays the same, essentially, even when things never change in a lifetime, at least, and things like that. It's a marvel of a piece. Well, I don't know what the lag is, to be honest. It shouldn't be. I seem fine. Yeah, I haven't read many myself in that regard, but I would find it a little perplexing. In the I'll get it up now, actually. Because I've actually yet to read the introduction that I had in this one. But just this, there was a part that I skimmed over. Is it here? So, like, yeah, here I think it is. But it's not necessarily extolling this kind of existence. Perhaps in its own way, the novel slyly demonstrates the natural peacefulness that a world without men might possess, but also suggests that this settling is the downfall of the women, that they do not go on searching. Would they have searched further, railed more, had men been part of their party? Would they have found the answers over a distant horizon, even if decades in the future? I don't really see this relevancy all that much. It's a bit of an obsession, I feel. That it's almost like it has to be mentioned that they're women. It's like, for fuck's sake. It's like, if this was the other way around, like, I really don't think the same question would be asked overall. You know, would these men have carried on searching until death had there been women around? It, like, you know, I don't. What's the relevance? You know, really, I don't get it. But when she continues on, I love this book. I love its implacable calmness, its unwillingness to give its secrets away. It's a puzzle that cannot be solved, isn't supposed to be solved, because it is in the process of grappling with it that we discover the point for ourselves. That's a good point. Every time I've read the novel, it has been pragmatic, opening up reflections on cruelty, human nature, capitalism. Kind of bit of a stretch, that bit, but reading it is not a passive experience, but one that provokes, that exasperates, that moves. But yeah, I mean, she will continue about. I do know what she means about the hope within it, I suppose, but I mean, it's a very hopeless hope, I would say, overall. Maybe that's what it all comes down to. There's a paradox, basically, but. But doesn't the best science fiction make us think about our world anew and who we are? If the narrator has lived life as best as she could, wildly unconventional, but one that has given her joy in many ways, hasn't she triumphed over her cruelty after all? Over having everything stripped from her, her dignity and essential humanity, winning in the end? I'm not sure what it won, but. Yeah, I mean, imagine if it did suddenly come out with some male character, and then he typically like tried to force himself on you know, whatever. Like, it would have been pretty disappointing. And I felt like, well, actually, I've theorized on this before, but I kind of feel like whenever I read these pieces where they start saying, "Oh, it's a feminist masterpiece" and all this kind of stuff, like the Bell Jar and stuff. The Bell Jar's a masterpiece of depression. That's about it. I mean. Okay. So name. Greenwood, something like that. Her name was Sylvia Plath, and the name of the character in it kind of hints at that. But I can't think of what. Esther Greenwood, is it? I think it might be. Anyway. Yeah, it is based more in the world that she's in, and there is some obvious difference because of she's a woman, especially in the era it was written and all of that kind of stuff. But, you know, she still managed to write a novel in this era and could publish it the same way that a man could. So I don't, you know, I just find it's kind of labeling it very unnecessarily in order to, I don't know, maybe rally the troops, as it were. Whereas really in this novel I just see a beautiful depiction of a world anew, as the introduction alludes to, but also one where you're just put into a kind of hypothetical scenario and asked to imagine what that might be like, but also without any of what you had before at your disposal to reference. So, and I just found those types of questions within it were just fascinating to ask and to ponder, basically, overall. I would say some of them can be decent, but obviously, you know, ignore them if you haven't read it yet, because it's not. Yeah, you're just there. In a way, you kind of get fed ideas as to what the book is. It also will spoil certain moments, and yeah, they're kind of misleading. They should be after the book, really. I don't really know why they're called, or what the point of them being introductions is. It should be afterthoughts or something like that, where if you do want to see what the kind of latest folk are saying or whatever, then fine. But if you don't want to do that, why does it have to be one specific person as well? It seems a bit odd to me. Yeah, I do feel like a lot of this book might have come about in terms of its, you know, current notoriety because of the title change. But I also find that to be kind of beautifully ironic, considering what the book also talks about in terms of it being never found, like, and potentially not, you know, it crosses over into reality. It's like art emulating life and vice versa and stuff, especially with it being retitled. So it kind of adds to the kind of mysticism of it and of literature itself. And yeah, I'm all for that, because yeah, I'm very glad that I've managed to, you know, we've managed to find this piece and give it a read, because it's definitely one that I'd recommend, if that wasn't obvious enough already. If you do need answers for everything, I mean, I kind of feel like you're going to be missing the point with this one. I mean, there is a slight frustration maybe to be found in the fact that we don't know why they were where they were or what the purpose of it was and whatnot. But if you were in the same scenario, you'd never know either. So it's what use is it? Even if you do get answers as well, like, they're never really going to be satisfactory in this life or in a book. You know, it's always a never-ending maze, a prison, as it were. So where did you hear about it? Paintball. Out of interest, was it something? Because I remember we did speak about it briefly a few streams back, and I'll admit, I mean, I think like the title made me think, what's this going to be like? And also I think the synopsis made me kind of wonder. But to me, I'm still kind of flabbergasted why it isn't being touted as an existential novel, because that's what it feels like to me. A lot, actually. I mean, I don't want to keep harping on about the Tartar Steppe, but that would be the one that, yeah, I'd couple it with. And if for anyone who has read I Who Have Never Known Men but hasn't read that one, I'd recommend it a lot. I mean, if you're obsessed with it being female driven, I suppose The Handmaid's Tale, but to be in all honesty, I found The Handmaid's Tale to be pretty dull. I didn't really get along with it that well. I thought it was all right, but I don't know, I thought it was going to be a lot more exciting, actually. And I quite like what I've read of Atwood. Like, I think she's got good style, like her imagination and whatnot, but with that one I was just like, it's a bit fucking dull. Whereas with this one, you kind of feel like you would say it's dull. I remember like a few times it's like, oh, I'm going to read about the girl who's learning or teaching herself how to count again, and I was excited. Like, I was just like, oh, I'm actually intrigued, and I want to know more. And I think there is a majestic element to writing in that regard, where it's talking about pretty banal stuff and yet I'm in. You know, I want to know more, and yeah. I mean, in some ways, it did cross over with like Lord of the Flies a little bit, or at least. But I think that's just in terms of like they're on an island, and they are left to their own devices, and that's about it. I did also think that the way it dealt with characters was very good, just because even though quite a few of them were just mentioned moments before they were going to die, it kind of gave you the idea of what her relationship to these other women really was, because they were so alien to her in many ways that, I mean, she is like a murderer in it essentially, but even the context of that, or the significance of it, kind of became flipped on its head a lot of the time, because she just saw it as relieving someone of pain. And really, I think a lot of us do think of it in this way, but there's such, difficulty with it surrounding it. I mean, there's, obviously it brings up a lot of issues for people and all that, but the women also went to her, especially when this was needed to be done, and it was almost because she hadn't been tarred and influenced by the old way of the world and all that kind of thing. So it had some, like, you could study many a section of this book just to be getting at all of the themes, all of like the critiques it's giving, and the potentiality of what significance drives in people, in a sense, or at least like how people hold on to a meaning even when it's quite clearly serving no purpose whatsoever. And it's almost like people will hold on to that regardless, because it shapes their identity as well. And I think the frailty of that is poignant throughout the whole piece. Yeah. Oh, what happened to your dinner party, Patrice? He's taking credit for your recommendation, Painbow. You're not going to take this lying down. Hello, James. Good to see you. Good to see you. I mean, there are others that I would probably throw in there. I have to admit, obviously the Tartar Steppe springs to mind. The Unbearable Lightness of Being as well, but not really because of the similarity in plot. Just some of basically, yeah, because of the title and like the core theme that's going on with that. I don't know, maybe it will come to me, but there's just, I mean, I could mention Albert Camus, because obviously the situation, I mentioned it being Sisyphean, but the absurd is there, like the absurdity of the fact that she carries on living for quite a long time, and she writes a whole book based on, everything that's happened, and yet in all likelihood the exercise of doing this is beyond meaningless, and yet because it has meaning in the moment, and it keeps her going essentially. And I as somebody who writes themselves, I mean, it just, that's basically the reason we do it, I would say, overall. But or the reason anyone does anything overall, especially in the face of not only adversity but nonsensicalness, or completely illogical reasoning. Well, you got lucky, did you? You got lucky. Is that meaning it's happening next week? Because your book is happening. Well, one book that you've recommended. Well, I think I'll be. I mean, if there's anything else people want to talk about when it comes to this book, is there any particular sections or themes, or even trivia that you want to throw in there? Because I'm cool to have a look. Could also, I did get a little article about it, which I quite liked. Oh yeah, it was republished 7 years after the author's death, and I do think there's a poignancy to that as well, considering how it ends. And I actually thought the ending was like gorgeous in terms of how she essentially is dying from some type of ovarian cancer, or that kind of sounded weird to me saying it was. I mean, in terms of like the significance, it's like a part of her body that is there for biological reasons but is actually completely meaningless in the world that she's in, ends up being and becoming alive in a sense just to bring about her death. I thought, the symbolism is almost like perfection. Pretty much, it's like, that has to be the reason, of the thing that kills her off. It's like, the very thing that she never really needed has to become in of itself impregnated with the disease that's going to kill her. It's like, that's good shit. That's good shit. I can't fault it for that. Oh, sell him. Sell him. You're still around, are you? I was wondering about you. I thought you got involved with, some unstable woman or two, knowing your antics. But, yeah. She mentions there being a moon, but the stars are not right, which made me think they've been taken to the distant past or future. Not that it matters. I'm not sure. I mean, the place could just as much be Earth, but, after nuclear war or some sort of Enola Gay bomb or whatever. But it could also just as easily be another planet. Like, I think the hints are there for it to be both, but I almost feel like the equality between those juxtapositions is kind of almost stating how irrelevant it is. And I did love how, like, near the end as well, it's almost like you could feel the author going, "Oh look, nothing's fucking happened in this. I got out of the cage, I found a bus, and now I'm here." And it's like, there's some beautiful, like, it's kind of like a novel self-awareness. And, almost like mocking itself, or critiquing itself in that regard. But, yeah, I thought it was great. It's one of those books that, if I saw an old mate or something, this would be one I'd probably give him, like, say that, you need to read this, because but it is interesting to think, like, if you told someone, oh yeah, this amazing sci-fi, and I don't want to keep harking on about this, but I really do feel like that is a misleading genre. Like, it's similar to when people say that 1984 is sci-fi. Yeah, it is, and more so than I would say this book is. But the story isn't really, not really. It's just the backdrop is. But, maybe that's just me. Yeah, I suppose. I mean, the bus kind of felt like it was almost. It was a very small explanation, wasn't it, of what may have happened, because it gives you an idea of how when the siren went off, that was probably a warning of a nuclear warhead or something or other. Although no, because obviously when they get out, they're fine. But maybe in the past, because it has been there for so long or whatever. And it gave you a vague idea as to what the guards were doing or how they were going from one place to the next. But in terms of like where the power plant is or whatever that's actually giving the area some electricity, that's never found. Assumedly it is around somewhere. How relevant is it? Like, does it matter? Not really, I mean, the sadness of it all is more to do with the vast nothingness and I suppose of how there is no really, there's no starting and ending point. It's all just one big nothing in the end. But good to know. Good to know. Hope you've been well. Happy you're here also. Is it well, just to check. There seems to be a couple more people tuning in. But is it just me and Painbow actually reading the fucking books? Maybe this should be the Painbow and GC book club, and me and him will just have a chat once a week. Because apparently it's too much to ask for the rest of you to read a fucking 150-page book. I don't want to be that guy, but I am that guy. So it's a good cover as well. That one especially, I think, tasty. It's good. I was a bit dubious about the fact that it does show a woman's face on it, but it's fine. It works. And I also like the one that follows this, although it's a bit simplistic. But maybe that is actually like the key to modern marketing, is to just repackage your stuff and give it a new title and just wait for the right moment. Oh, you already read it, did you? Fair, I guess. Although I would say, really, you should have reread it, knowing the length. I don't know. You can harass her somewhere, probably, if you want. But I know what you mean. We did make the effort. Well, I think that will. I mean, maybe I'll read a bit from the beginning because I'm kind of intrigued to have a look at. Actually, does anyone want to spin that wheel? No, they don't, apparently. Charming. But yeah, I won't read too much of this, but Since I barely venture outside these days, I spend a lot of time in one of the armchairs rereading the books. I only recently started taking an interest in the prefaces. The authors talk readily about themselves, explaining their reasons for writing the book. This surprises me. Surely it was more usual in that world, in the one in which I have lived in, for people to pass on the knowledge that they had acquired. They often seem to feel the need to emphasize that they wrote the book not out of vanity, but because someone asked them to, and that they had thought about it long and hard before accepting. How strange. It suggests that people were not avid to learn, and that you had to apologise for wanting to convey your knowledge. Or they explain why they felt it was appropriate to publish a new translation of Proust, because previous efforts, laudable though they may be, lacked something or other. But why translate it when it must have been so easy to learn different languages and read anything you wanted to directly? These things leave me utterly baffled. True, I am extremely ignorant. Apparently, I know even less of these matters than I thought I did. The authors express their gratitude to those who taught them, who opened the door to this or that avenue of knowledge, and because I have absolutely no idea of what they're talking about, I usually read these words with a degree of indifference. But suddenly, yesterday, my eyes filled with tears. I thought of Anthea, and was overcome by a tremendous wave of grief. I could picture her sitting on the edge of a mattress, her knees to one side, sewing patiently with her makeshift thread of plaited hairs, which kept snapping, stopping to look at me, astonished, quick to recognise my ignorance and teach me what she knew, apologising that it was so little, and I felt a huge wrench and began to sob. I had never cried before. There was a pain in my heart so powerful as the pain of the cancer in my belly, and I, who no longer speak because there is no one to hear me, began to call her. Anthea, Anthea, I shouted. I couldn't forgive her for not being there, for having allowed death to snatch her, to tear her away from my clumsy arms. I chastised myself for not having held on to her, for not having understood that she couldn't go on any more. I told myself that I'd abandoned her because I was frigid, as I had been all my life, as I shall be when I die, and so I was unable to hug her warmly, and that my heart was frozen, unfeeling, and that I hadn't realised that I was desperate. It's a nice intro. Little snippets of info that you need that foreshadow it. It also oddly foreshadows how she wants to conclude it as well, which I like. Although, all right, if I'm going to be critical at some points, it seems a little bit beyond the realm of believability when author names get mentioned. Mostly because of like how many books did she actually have access to? I think it was about 20. I mean, maybe one of them was like talking about the most lauded authors of the last fucking 1,000 years or something. I don't know, but yeah, there's little bits where I'm just like, okay. Fucking Proust gets mentioned. Dostoevsky gets mentioned as well. It's just little things. I suppose it's fine. I mean, there are only several or a handful of them mentioned, but they seem to always be the most canonical kind of types. And it's like, okay, fine, whatever. Oh, what, the rehashing? Yeah, true. YouTube these days is like a fucking... It's just... I mean, I don't know about your feeds are like, but mine's just full of absolute garbage. Whatever. Yeah, is there anything else in this one? Because I kind of feel like I'm stretching this out a bit. Yeah, I'll read a bit of this. This isn't bad. So this is an article by Anne Morgan. There she is. I want to get to this I'm going to start from here. The novel is also a powerful portrait of how we try to make sense of things, the ways we attempt to read situations we lack the necessary contextual information to understand, as so many of us do when confronted with texts that work differently to the kinds of stories we're used to. The women in the novel draw on their own limited knowledge to plug the gaps in their comprehension of this strange new world. In the case of the narrator, who has been in prison since she was an infant and knows little of adult human civilization, this tendency is particularly clearly demonstrated in the naive fantasy she constructs around the young guard who keeps watch over the cage. Ignorant of the mechanics of sexual relationships, she tells herself stories that blend scraps of information with instinct and guesswork to bring about a mysterious eruption in her maturing body. This was extremely difficult because I was simultaneously the inventor of the story, the narrator, and the listener awaiting the shock of the unexpected. Indeed, exploring the potential and purpose of storytelling forms an increasingly urgent theme. Repeatedly, along with questions about what defines human existence, the novel invites us to consider what a text is and what it does. Towards the end of the book, the narrator, who we learn is writing the account we're reading, reflects on the strange alchemy that happens when someone reads a story. The reader and I, thus mingled, will constitute something living that will not be me because I will be dead, and will not be the person as they were reading it before, because my story added to their mind will then become a part of their thinking. That's what I was talking about earlier. Yet, even as she examines storytelling, Harpman resists many of its conventions. There is a playful irreverence at work sometimes in the text. Yeah, I quite like this part actually, when she said, "Oh, basically, I could name all of these things but I can't be bothered because that would be too tedious and I wouldn't enjoy it." And I kind of felt like that was a lovely author moment of going, "Fuck off!" Just like, and there are a few of these moments here and there. At other points, the narrative seems to critique itself. Yeah, so few things happened during all those years of walking. I found the bus, I lost the road, I arrived here. It is almost as if though Harpman is taunting the reader with her refusal to bow to plot conventions by withholding the revelations of resolutions the setup seems to demand. Indeed, on the face of it, this is a profoundly bleak and open-ended book. To read it this way, though, would be to miss the subtleties at work beneath the surface that bring about the very transformation the protagonist claims reading is capable of affecting. For in being worked upon by Harpman and Swartz's fine words, we find ourselves changed from passive bystander to active participant. The story we hold in our hands may be a lonely one, but the fact that we are able to read it and enter into its protagonist's strange experiences conveys a message of profound hope. I'd still take contention with the hope element, but I feel like it has the hope of human beings, I suppose, or at least, but I think it's more our resilience that it's in celebration of. It's like, yeah, we stand in the face of absurdity, and we always will, regardless of how much we may or may not travel the universe. The expectancy that we're going to find some sort of holy grail of answers out there, or come face to face with God. It's just, yeah, it ain't happening, basically. But the beauty in which we can ask the question is probably what the answer to life really is. So, yeah, for sure. I mean, I would like, it's a shame she's dead, because I'd like to ask some questions as to like what was her main influence. With the original being in French, I kind of assumed that she was a compatriot of the country, but she was actually Belgian. I mean, it's basically next door to it, but yeah, she does. I'm sure she has had French philosophy influence her book here. But I would be intrigued to know what else. Like, if she'd never read The Tartar Step, I'd be like kind of amazed. I'd be like, oh, okay, really? Fair enough. But you really captured that whole passage of time going by like, you know, grains of sand through fingertips kind of thing. But I think what I especially liked was the fact that she didn't need to come up with some bullshit Sisyphus figure to give an example of her point. Because the main issue I have with that, although I do still love it as a, you know, simile of what life is or whatever, or symbol of it, and of this like pointless endeavor of pushing a rock up the hill. It's a very concrete way of trying to demonstrate the absurdity of it all. Whereas with this book, I was just kind of thinking there's similarities to this all the time. Like you at the beginning of the stream, people are talking about the football. How absurd is it that we're watching this week in, week out, knowing exactly how it can end either way, and also knowing that really there is never any end to it whatsoever. This team won that week, the other team will win the other week, the shit team at some point will be good, the good team at some point will be shit. It's all the same thing overall, like it never ends. It's just, and yet because it is in the moment, the significance is much more about the now. And I suppose that's what life, or the meaning of, really is, if you can take much solace from that. I mean, that's the thing, I don't see where the hope is in that overall. Surely it's much more of a celebration of just being alive, is what the message of the novel is. Like, even if your life is that of a Kafkaesque bug where you are literally trapped in a land that has nothing in it, and you're living on scraps of tinned canned beans, and you're just hoping to come across something here and there, which always turns out to be another version of the same thing. It's just, but it's still a life, you know, and it's still your life if that's the one you've been born into, much like it would be for, you know, I don't know, kids living in the streets of Baghdad or whatever. So, and it is true that there is no more, you know, meaning to their lives as there is to ours. And when people always bring up these examples of like, oh, I shouldn't moan because these people have this life and all this kind of stuff, it's like the arrogance behind that kind of comment always pissed me off. So I'm going to rant about it. But it's more like the assumed betterment of your own life just because you live in what is presumed to be, you know, more progressive or whatever, doesn't necessarily dictate that your life is any happier or meaningful. Because I think where I take umbrage with it is it kind of assumes that your life is better because you have more access to clean water or whatever. And assumedly, I kind of agree. It is easier. But water would never taste as sweet unless you actually had to fight for it or to think of ways in order to which to get it. Because when you always get something for nothing, it just, you know, it actually robs you of meaning overall. So somebody who's living in squalor, from what we would view as a very disadvantaged vantage point, how do you know? Like, we don't know what it is like to, you know, eat when you're starving to the point of like you will eat fucking anything, you know, and just like how water would quench you when you're that desperate. So who knows? I mean, I don't know whether that gives any. I don't think it does give any like more significance or whatever. But the comparison, to fall back on the on the point, is a very arrogant one, I would say, overall, and one that assumes a superiority, which I think is disgusting overall. Yeah, maybe that is all it is. Right, so we're going to decide on next week's book. Luckily for you lot, the decision has been made, so you don't have to think. Give me all right, this. Anyone watching, I mean, when I close this is when the review's done. I might mention a bit more about it if it comes up, but I don't think so. Read it if you haven't, even though that I've spoiled the fuck out of it during this. It's not about the plot. It's much more about how you take in. I mean, I suppose when I think about it, it's like, why couldn't I have been reading books like this at school? Like, these are the types of things that I'm just like, this would have really fascinated me growing up and learning. Like, even if we only imagine being given this and you were just told that you were going to explore the themes or explore the ideas, or just even ask a like question of like, what does the protagonist in this particular novel, what does she want? What's she hopeful for? You know, just little things like that would have made education far more intriguing. But that would have never happened here because she wasn't British, so we need to read fucking Dickens. Or whatever. So, let's have a look, shall we? Let me, already got it on the books thing. Let's get the fuck out of here. Just need to load it up again. Is this your suggestion? I think you're about to get roasted. Oh, by the way, Patrick, that PDF, did you just go to PDF convert to ebook and just that is that what you did? Is that all I'm worth to you? Now you're getting an idea of what the next book is. Han Kang recently won the Nobel Prize, and Patrick's been getting on my arse to read some of her work and has kindly sent me a book of hers called The Vegetarian. It's quite short. I don't know why I'm saying that, really. But thank you for sending it, by the way, because I haven't really started it, but I read the first little quote about what it's going to be about, and then I read the first page and I was like, ooh, I like the look of this. I have to admit. So no, go with me on this, because I'm sure you'll agree. So okay, that's what the first thing says. A horror story in its depiction of the unknowability of others, of the sudden feeling that you've never actually known someone close to you. Its three-part structure is brilliant, gradually digging deeper and deeper into darker and darker places. The writing is spare and haunting, but perhaps most memorable is its crushing climax, a phantasmagoric yet emotionally true moment that's surely one of the year's most powerful. This is an ingenious, upsetting, and unforgettable novel. Tell me you're not intrigued, and then listen to this and tell me you don't want to read more. So, part 1. Okay, I don't like how that looks on the screen. Okay, there we go. Before my wife turned vegetarian, I'd always thought of her as completely unremarkable in every way. To be frank, the first time I met her, I wasn't even attracted to her. Middling height, bobbed hair, neither long nor short, jaundiced, sickly looking skin, somewhat prominent cheekbones. Her timid, sallow aspect told me all I needed to know. As she came up to the table where I was waiting, I couldn't help but notice her shoes, the plainest black shoes imaginable, and that walk of hers, neither fast nor slow, striding nor mincing. However, if there wasn't any special attraction, nor did any particular drawbacks present themselves, and there was no reason for the two of us not to get married, the passive personality of this woman, in whom I could detect neither freshness nor charm, or anything especially refined, suited me down to the ground. There was no need to affect intellectual leanings in order to win her over, or to worry that she might be comparing me to the preening men who pose in fashion catalogues, and she didn't get worked up if I happened to be late for one of our meetings. The paunch that started appearing in my mid-20s, my skinny legs and forearms that steadfastly refused to bulk in spite of my best efforts, the inferiority complex I used to have about the size of my penis, I could rest assured that I wouldn't need to fret about such things on her account. That's a beginning. So yeah, next week's book is going to be The Vegetarian by Han Kang. And it's a fucking hilarious beginning, come on. And it will be the first time that we're going to test. I mean, to be honest, her winning a Nobel Prize seemed to be out of fucking nothing from what I could see. So yeah, why not? I'll give it a go. And I'm intrigued to do so. I quite like that introduction was kind of beautifully toned, let's say. I quite like the fact that it's so savage. And I know you agree with me. Come on. Yeah, aside from that, I got kicked off of Patreon this week, so that's the reason I'm not plugging that. I think Painbow mentioned it, so I might as well address this. If anyone wondered as well, because I'm sure no one is, but yeah. The Patreon is gone. For reasons that I can explain if need be, but it's kind of banal overall. But it does present me an opportunity to try and garner sympathy and therefore get donations, wink wink. It was kicked off, or I was kicked off rather, because apparently I'd broken some rules because of Heather, basically. Because of the depiction of CP, I think, would be the reasoning in their regard. I mean, It was funny, really, because it said, like, oh, it's because of this material, and then it puts a post from 4 years ago. It's like, took you quite a while to notice this, and I did reply, and if you want, I can read the reply. I'm all right with that, because yeah, I suppose in a way that was my appeal to it. But yeah, it was something to do with the child sexual protection shit or something. And apparently I'd broken this rule by having Heather available on there. And they kicked me off without any warning as well. They just were like, boop, you're out. See you later. It was like, okay, that's nice. Fucking hell. Talk about... It's always Heather, yeah. Let me see. I'll find what I said. Because I mean, I could read what they wrote to me, but it's kind of boring, to be honest. It's just like, oh, we've gone through your. To brief over it, it says. Okay, Patreon has zero tolerance for real or animated child sexual abuse material or other exploitative works depicting sexualized minors regardless of how the works were created, e.g. hand-drawn cartoon, text-based, photorealistic or computer-generated. I love how basically it's saying, pedo! Like, and it's like, what? What the fuck are you talking about? And it says examples of the violation that led to this decision were found in the following locations. Post, Heather, ebook copy, December 6th, 2020. I mean, the most recent was 2023. There's 3 of them. And that was it. Like, and then it just goes into the kind of, you know, bullshit jargon. It's like, oh, okay, great. My riposte was where is it? I mean, the person was called Robin. Don't know whether they were male or female. I said, well, Robin, I'll put this on screen, it's probably more fun. Just get this. If I can get a fucking better view of this. Well, this looks shit, but whatever. If I can... Well, Robin, this is the most ludicrous decision I've ever come across. I'm an author. Heather is a work of fiction. That's it. I really don't know what else to fucking say. Why wasn't I contacted if there was a concern? Also, I don't know why it says you have been sent this message because you recently opened a help request with the Patreon team, because I did no such thing. Seems like some cunt reported me, or you've just blindly gone and believed their complaint without doing any check whatsoever. Or you're just following the flags of your stupid automated bots because, like them, you can't fucking think a lick for yourself. Fuck you, and fuck your website. So, yeah. I'm not expecting a reply anytime too soon, if I'm honest. And that's it. But yeah, kind of unbelievable. I mean, if I was in any way, you know, doing that well, it would be pretty annoying, but I'm just detailing how I got kicked off of Patreon, basically. But yeah, well, they didn't reply to that. But I felt like I had to say something. I'm so sick of this. Like, just in general, like, I'm sick of like the assumption that because I wrote something like this, it in any way says something about me as a person. That it's ridiculous. Like, I don't even know what the fuck to say to this. I remember watching James Flynn's interview with Matthew Stocko, and there's an interesting part where he's just asking him about, you know, the reviews that Cows got when it first came out, and Stocko says like they were mostly, you know, pretty favourable. They were seeing like the themes, the meaning, blah blah blah. But then as the internet occurred, it was always suddenly about how outrageous it was and how taboo and how sick it was and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, that to me says everything. I mean, the fact that this platform that was happy to take their cut of whatever money I made for years has suddenly decided that any and all depictions of such things must be banned is kind of just a sign of, like, yeah, the ludicrous times we're in, where it's like you're not allowed to write fiction anymore. Like, you can't. And I also resent the fact that that novel is only seen as that. It's like, really? If I wanted to write fucking that kind of erotica or whatever, I would have probably done an OnlyFans, or I would have advertised it as in that fashion. Then I could actually at least understand if they had some qualms about, you know, it being on their site or whatever. But it's like, fuck you. It's like, just the times we're in, man. It's fucking bullshit. I mean, I find it funnier as well because Fubar has like easily as many, you know, graphic, grim depictions, as well as my other short stories and stuff like that. And it's just like, oh, it's just because of that one thing. As if I put it out there saying, oh yeah, this is a memoir. It's fucking unreal. And I'm talking about it like as if it's done well, as if it's done something, you know, and it hasn't. It's been very minimal in terms of its impact. So don't get me wrong, I'm not like bitching because the whole world misunderstood it, because it's not. It's just like 100 people or something, and yet somehow it's still getting flagged. It's like, how am I getting flagged when I'm not even getting traction? Like, I don't understand what the fuck that is. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, but then we turn in. It's like we come back to this fucking novel. We go full circle of like, yeah, I thought the same. It probably is some dickhead, but it's like, how I can't know, and apparently they can't tell me. But if that's enough to get something or somebody kicked off something, I'm remiss as to how to respond to that, because it's like, really, what? I'm not even allowed to say, well, hang on a minute. Like, you know, I'm making up stories. Like, that's the thing. It's, why do I have to justify that, and why do I have to suffer punishment or whatever when, if it is the word of someone else? But again, and I will contradict myself and say, well, I don't think it is that as well, because maybe it's just bots going through things looking for flag words or whatever. As I said in the response, it's like, I don't know. And the fact that I'm getting no information, but I'm just getting kicked off, it's like, it's flabbergasting to me. Like, it's like, wow, this is crazy shit. So there will be no more Patreon for well, ever, actually. I'd rather, yeah, just do my own thing, and if YouTube kicks me off, then, well, that's it, you know. I'll have a website up soon. That's my only it's not a lot in terms of money, but it's a bit, you know. It's annoying. It's a little chunk, about 40 quid a month, which, you know, comes in handy, but it's not a lot. So I'll adjust. But yeah, it's annoying more because I was trying to like get it going recently, and I find it funny because it's like that's the thing that gets me kicked off, and yet in recent weeks I've been like sharing these ebooks for the for the book club totally illegally. Then apparently that's fine, like I'm allowed to do that, but if I mention anything Lolita-esque I can fuck the right off. So no, that's the thing. I've been quiet. I don't know what I've done. I think it's because I have a girlfriend. I've pissed off a lot of femcel bitches who are reporting me for existing, basically. Oh, this guy. As I said, I just looked at Amazon and The Vegetarian is not available as a paperback until... Really? That's weird. I'd say suck it up, motherfucker. I'll send you a copy of it. It's like 100 odd pages. It's short. Don't be a bitch. And... thing is, as much as I want to agree with you lot, I fail to see why someone would be bothering to do this overall. For what? I mean, maybe, but it's more alarming that could work to me. But I never know. I mean, if you are the person who's doing this, I mean, at least have the fucking cojones to come forward. But again, I feel like that's my own ego going, this must be someone. It probably isn't. It's just the way that these shitty platforms work nowadays. Oh yeah, the book is sold out. That's what winning the note. Yeah, wow. Good for her. Say that much. Painbay, you got to read it, motherfucker. Come on, we've all got to make sacrifices here. Do you think I like reading ebooks? Come on. Well, to answer any of you, I mean, I am working on a website, or I think I might have mentioned this. But yeah, there'll be a website soon, and when it is out, you can download my shit for free, basically. You can't get paperback copies of it for free as much. I'd love to send them out, but I can't afford it. So yeah, we'll see how long the website lasts, and that's when I think we can know. But yeah, I mean, it does give me a kind of pause for thought as to like how I'm putting stuff out. Maybe I'll continue with the book I'm currently on, and I will put that out. I plan on putting out some novellas next year. Don't know how many yet, but I might have to seek traditional publishing, which would be a funny position to be in, considering how I've tried to go about doing this whole thing to begin with. But yeah, we'll see. But But yeah, obviously I'll let you know once I actually have it ready, or at least nearly ready, and all of that kind of stuff. And that's all I can really say, I suppose, at the moment. Which I think will bring me to the end of the stream. I don't really have much to add. I mean, we can talk some bullshit for a while if you want. But actually, someone... Good, just get the Kindle version and reserve judgment. And Anya, I want to add the comment, but I'm trying to not let YouTube fuck me in the arse. So, but you know, I am in agreement. We know who we're talking about. I've heard that as a traditional published author you get 10% of the selling price. I haven't heard of it being that low, but to be honest, if you have a whole team working behind what you're doing, you're probably still going to make more. It depends. Like, marketing in of itself is an art form, you know, and no one really knows how it works. It's just all about right time, right place. But just read it on your phone, dickhead. Come on, it's easy. I've been showing you every week how this is done. It's not that bad. I read this book for tonight on there and I enjoyed it thoroughly. But I do sort of wish I had a copy of it. So, but at least I'm in the privileged position now of thinking like, well, I could buy the copy of it, or I could just say, meh, why bother? Because it was probably published just as a cash grab, because I'm pretty sure the publishers of The Handmaid's Tale were behind it, and I think that's the reason they renamed it to such a name, because they were trying to basically cash in on the theme of, oh no, men bad. So still a great book though, Jacqueline Harpman. This one to you. It's true. It's true. He's been outed. I'll suck it up, you whiny little bitch. Fucking hell. You're reading shit on a screen right now, for fuck's sake. If you're talking about this, it's here, by the way. But I will have new covers for my book soon, and yeah, maybe some extra stuff. So I don't know. We'll talk. You can let me know if you want, because that might be the last copy with that cover. So if that tickles your bollocks, then it's all yours, baby. I would assume so, because yeah, boomers have all the money. But how old are you? I would assume that you're either a millennial or Gen Xer, to be honest. Gen Xers are more boomer than they like to admit. Totally unrelated, but does the red wine cause headaches in the morning? I'm a professional, so no, but you do get this kind of caked wineness about the mouth, which isn't particularly pleasant. I think when you're not used to it, yeah, it can give you headaches. But if you drink it over a good meal, which I should have done, nah, it'll be fine. Yeah, you lot, you need to ease yourselves into it a bit more. Start off whenever, if you're going to read in the evening, just have a couple of glasses of wine. You know, if you're going to watch, I watched Frasier with some wine. That's nice. Yeah, ease into it. Or maybe better still, just like have a glass or two when you're having a steak. Good, you know, rich kind of meal. That's the way to do it. Well, the only other explanation I can give is that you're either drinking really cheap shit, which when it comes to wine you don't want to do ever, or you're a bunch of pussies, which is probably most likely the answer. You know, you don't have to Since when do you want a copy of Fubar, Patrick? Yeah, I'll admit, I mean, I'm probably more boomer than fucking anything else these days. Remember when sitcoms were well written? Yeah, I remember. I mean, this is the time where I'm just looking at the clock thinking, oh yeah, match of the day's on soon. United won. And Arsenal lost. And there's no Man City on it, so I'm all for match of the day tonight. It's my kind of highlight show. Painbow, why don't you have a go on the wheel? And if you win, I'll buy you a copy of the book. Hey, how's that sound? If I can find it. United are playing Fenerbahce this week as well. I don't know when. I'm guessing Thursday or maybe Wednesday. And yeah, to answer Well, no, you already promised to send me the wine. I don't know why you're getting free stuff. Talk to me privately and maybe we'll sort something out. But yeah, well, I think I'm going to be off because I can feel my drunkenness seeping in, and I want to savor it for match of the day, whenever the fuck that's on. But if anyone wants to send me some money, because obviously getting kicked off Patreon is, you know, pretty harsh. So you know, thought I might get some charity for that, but apparently not so far. Oh, there it is. A half price spin. You cheeky bastard. Mate rates. He's assumed mate rates. Gotta love it. Keep checking. Keep checking what? I told you I need these other 13 litres to get through 13 litres. No, I mean I'm fine with you asking for a copy, but you know, wine me first, you know? Then we'll talk. What do you want? Like, you can let me know now and I'll remember. I'll remember. And when I can, I will issue you with the, you know, newest editions with a few little bonus gifts. £5 is in line with inflation. I think you have a funny view of what inflation really is. You've gone the reverse way. Inflation my ass. £5 is just the tax, motherfucker. I mean, I'll give you a spin anyway, because, you know, just a nice guy. Where's my wheel? There it is. Alright, that's big enough, isn't it? That's what he said. Okay, we got 2 spins. Timur, Mr. T. Moore, you're going first for that because you've actually adhered to the requested amount. Painbow, get to the back of the fucking queue. Sit down. Alright, Timur, this is for you. I should put end stream on this again. I think that to me is pick next book. We have already decided what the next book is going to be, but you know, the week after, your choice. Do you want to, if you know what you want us to read now, let me know. Got the notebook ready here, so, but if you want to think on it, that's fine. Remember, it can be any book you want. Within reason. That's all I say. Within reason. You can let me know, because I'm sure think on it, because we're going to read The Vegetarian first. But yeah, let me know whenever you think of what you'd like us to read. Keep it within 200 to 300 pages, I guess. Like more, I don't know, 100,000 words, I suppose. It doesn't really matter, but yeah, just let me know. And again, it can be whatever you want within that context. So takes care of next week at least. Painbow, this is a sympathy spin, so don't expect me to honour the result necessarily. Okay? Oh, it's a confession. Lucky you. You have won the opportunity to confess some of your, or one of your deepest, darkest secrets. You can do so anonymously. It would be better if you did it on video, so we can all, laugh at you. But it can just be through voice. You can do it through email, whatever. It's a confession. You've won the chance to redeem your soul. Thank you. And I think that's it for tonight. I ran the risk, Patrick, but hasn't happened. I'm fingering my missus as I type. There you go. That's a lucky woman. Remember, you can do it in any format you want. You could just send me something and I'll just read it, and no one will know it's you. Well, someone might, but you know. Well, yeah, that killed another 10 minutes. Kind of wish it killed a bit more time, to be honest, but yeah, well, such is life. That's it from me, motherfuckers. I think I'm going to be off. Enjoyed this one. Yeah, definitely check out I Who Have Never Known Men. Think around Christmas, maybe we'll do an assessment of each book. We'll have a brief discussion and maybe do a ranking bullshit thing or whatever. I don't know. I mean, I said that this is the book of the stream so far, and I do stick to that, but I did remember that I've also covered Stoner, for instance. But yeah, in terms of like, I don't know, I suppose the surprise in which I found this novel and the unexpected discovery was a joy to behold overall. And yeah, well, we can just have a bit of a discussion on it. It doesn't necessarily need to be a fucking top 10 or whatever, but it could be fun. And also, yeah, I might throw together a couple of Cope and Steve specials, because why not, you know? I act like it's going to be different, like I'm not going to be drinking wine and talking shit for 2 hours, but yeah. Well, The Tenant, exactly, could be in there. Who knows? There's a few that I would be, I don't know, I guess annoyed not to mention. But when I think of like Cow's Pen Pal, The Tenant, then I can kind of see, okay, yeah, they're in a similar bracket. But then, yeah, some of the other ones, not so much. I don't know. I don't think it matters that much. I think it's more about what we all thought of the book at the time, and comparatively to the others. Yeah, whatever that fucking means. We can just chat about it, or we could just play Super Seducer and get drunk. That would be my vote. So yeah, well, think on that. Read The Vegetarian by Han Kan, and yeah, well, I'll see you next week, and then we can all judge Timur's entry and whatever, I guess. Until then, thanks for tuning in. It's been fun. I'm enjoying the book club, so yeah, get involved. Read the book, for fuck's sake. Just read it. It's not, I mean, I know it's a bit of a pain in the ass, but just put, like, literally, I think it takes me about 4 hours to read these, if that. In all honesty, I do a 20-minute read in the morning that might extend to 40 minutes. And most of the time I'm done with the book by fucking Thursday. So, come on. You're taking the piss if you're not reading it. Well. Orwell would be good. I agree. Pay for a guaranteed inclusion, and you know you're golden. You keep fucking suggesting these Nobel Prize winners, then well, you know, don't complain when the quality, you know, you're just a conformist. It's the part of the stream that I need to get the fuck off, because I'm just going to start hurling insults for the sake of my own entertainment. So getting up for air, fucking Belgian twat. Coming up for air, yeah, good vote. Pay for it and it will happen. So yeah. All right, I'm gonna go because I am drunk, and I guess this is where I'd say join the Patreon. Cunt. Nah, just send me money. That would be nice. There's a website coming soon. I'll have a number of free books for you to download, and we'll take it from there. I hope you had a good week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Don't work. Please don't work. You know, Sunday is God's day. So chill out. Do whatever you want. And until next time, I'll see you then. It's been a pleasure. This book was literally one of the favourite ones I've featured so far. No shit. So take from that what you will. And until next time, See you later.